Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm a 737 pilot, and today we will review the Inibuilds Airbus A310. Now, the A310 is not one of those aircraft that you would typically expect a review on because it is not an aircraft that's up for purchase, as it is available for free in Microsoft Flight Simulator since the 40th anniversary update. However, it is a magnificent airplane and I still feel that it deserves its own review. So, with that said and done, I don't think there are going to be too many other people doing this, so I thought, well, I might do it as well. So we're sitting here on the Airbus delivery ramp in Toulouse, and we are here in the A310 in the modern days Airbus house colors. I'm saying modern days because at the time where the A310 was first revealed to the public, they have still been using their old colors, but I kind of thought the modern days look a bit better, and most importantly they've been included in the aircraft that came with Microsoft Flight Simulator, so I did not have to use any external version up here. Alright, let's start by doing a quick walk around, and I'm saying quick walk around because the weather in Toulouse today really isn't all that good. So, you know, there's that saying that the weather conditions of course have no influence on the length of the walk around at all, but things might be a little bit different up today. So we'll just start down here. And the first thing we notice is that we do have quite good quality textures up here, even though they aren't 100% sharp when you're down low, and up close to the main airframe you can see that still things are kind of sharp, and for all the text and everything, like in here the toilet service, we do still get our additional textures which do make the overall thing quite sharp. Let's go ahead with a quick look into the wheel well bay, because this is typically areas that developers might be neglecting, and looks like in here as well. We have fairly good detail nose wheel strut, but we do not have anything inside the wheel well there, it seems. Which is okay, because due to the nose gear bay doors closing, we don't really see a lot up here anyway, do we? Apart from that, overall, some really nice texturing done here. Looking at the details, they all seem to be there. Like, we have our probes, we have the latches. The text is sharp, so that's something that I'm always looking into as well. Going over to the engine, we have the CF6 engines modeled here, and only the CF6, so the other engine options that are available for the A310 are not modeled. Inibuilds have commented on that, and they did say that the reason they did it is because the CF6 have been the most popular with the A310, and they only wanted to include a single engine model. Also note that we are seeing the second strongest model of the CF6 here, so there have been engine models that were quite a bit stronger, but they featured the model that was most popular with operators, and that is what we see inside the simulator. Also worth pointing out some of the details on the glass up there. If you look really close, then we can even see that there is some rain reflecting on the glass. So you see that? You can see it a bit. There is some rain currently pouring down from it. That's a really nice feature there. Same here on the navigation lights on the wing. So overall, that is quite some good detail we are seeing over here. Now comes the main gears. Once again, they do look detailed, and everything up here is actually quite readable. So look at this. Contrôle de gonflage. Sorry for my French, it's not that good. But that is quite cool to see all those details up here. Also, we can see the brake fans down here on the wheels. There's a little bit of handwriting down on the tires. That's really nice, because engineers do that pretty often if they just have to, you know, save some information, and then they just handwrite it down on the tires. So we do actually see that quite often in real life. Going on, instructions once again very clearly readable on the aft cargo doors and on the bulk cargo. Overall, really good modeling, so absolutely nothing to complain about there except for the lack of a paint kit. So Inibuilds did not make a paint kit available. They said they don't intend to do so either. So that is something that I'm rather sad about, because I did repaint one livery on my own, and things could have been a lot better if we did have a proper paint kit available. But overall, there is the white livery included, so that makes painting kind of possible. Right, the other side of the wing looks pretty much the same as the other side did. Overall, good looking. Nice to see also how the engines are rotating there in the wind, because we currently do have 26 knots of wind up here in Toulouse, with a couple of thunderstorms around. Good details on the static ports as well. I like how they look. They're totally crisp and sharp, so we can see that they certainly have their own texture there and are not just painted on the rest of the airframe. So really good job getting that balanced. Now, from here on, let's head over into the aircraft and let's have a look at the second next surprise that we had with it, which is the virtual cabin. Now, initially the aircraft comes only with a light version that's meant for both computer and Xbox use, which basically stops all the way over here, where the curtain is. But the computer version has an update available through the marketplace for free, which adds the virtual cabin to the aircraft. And this is probably the best detailed cabin that I've seen so far. So if we just have a look at the business class over here, first thing I do notice is that we do have the rain effects on the glass, which is really nice. But then we also have the IFE screen, which actually displays the stuff you would typically expect from flight information for passengers in flight. So that includes things like vertical speed, altitude, speed, time to destination, and so on. So that's a really nice feature. Also up here, some really good details in the passenger service units. I mean, look at this. They're not clickable, and the signs are always illuminated. But overall, some really good job in the cabin there. Going back to the economy class, here as well, just look at those details on the seats here. That is really high quality stuff. So in my opinion, this is the best cabin that we have seen in Flight Simulator so far. There is one downside though, that is when you're on the ground with everything set up, so you have the APU running, you have air conditioning on, you basically don't get any sounds in the cabin over here. That's a little unfortunate. Also, it seems to me like the ground service bus is always turned on, because as you can see, we do have power in the cabin right now, even though our aircraft is cold and dark. That is just something that I came to notice. Alright. So that's a look in the cabin. Now let's head over where the majority of you people will probably spend the majority of your time, which is of course the cockpit. Let's just about keep the door open. We are flying an Airbus demonstrator aircraft today. The first thing I want to do over here is just have a look at all those details. Now the circuit breakers are not clickable, but nonetheless we can see that even though they are not clickable, a lot of work went into this stuff, and we can see how it's really high quality. Overall, same thing goes for the ORED panel. Even if we go up close like this, we can see that the textures still remain crisp, and same goes, for example, here for the jump seat. Now the jump seat is not clickable, so you cannot extend it. The same goes for the primary jump seat over here, which is just in its stoked position. But apart from that, we can click the handrests. We can not move the pilot seat, so they are in a fixed position, but we can hide the control column down here if we wanted to. We do also have working sunshades, at least on the front of the windows. There are none simulated on the side windows, even though the hangars for them are simulated up here, but we have our EFB in place over here, which basically stands in their way. Now, the EFB still somewhat work in progress at the time where I am recording this, so I'm currently recording it with the first beta version released after the initial release. You can see the date up here, that's accurate, 22nd November 2022, and everything is still a little bit work in progress over here. But let's go over some of the primary features that we do see and that we do not see. So we can see up here on the welcome page, if I may call it like this, we have some basic aircraft details like this, currently version 1.15. Flight details are taken directly from the FMC. We can select different panel states up here. So today we're going to start the aircraft in cold and dark. Then Over here we can select different panel states as well, and we can also save them as default state. However, it is not possible to save custom panel states. So that's a bit of a thing that I would have liked to see, since this is a long-haul airliner with a range of approximately 5,000 nautical miles. It would be nice if it was possible to save a flight and resume later on, but it's not, because it's not possible to save the panel state. Going on, we have our ground services panel, so we can put our chocks in place. We do have ground power. Well, we don't have a jetway over here in the Airbus delivery center. And we could also connect our start unit. From here we also control all the doors like this. Maybe some cargo doors as well, just for inspection. And we do have a basic pushback feature, pretty similar to that from the Phoenix Airbus. So you can tell it to go backwards, you can tell it to go left, right, and you have a stop button up here. Next up is the weather screen. That is something that is new with the first update. So in here we can get the META for our departure and destination airports. Those are taken again from the FMC. And we also have a lookup feature where we can just get weather from anywhere. So if I wanted some weather from, let's say, Toulouse, then I'll just about do this. And now it's downloading the weather. And you can see up here why the rain is currently actually moving across the windshields, because we have gust 35 knots up here in Toulouse right now, which is going to provide for some interesting approaches, but which is also going to serve to test the autopilot as we come in for an automatic approach later on. Going on, we do have the checklists, very much designed in the normal Airbus checklist way that most of us are familiar, and it's pretty nice that we do have those available right in the flight deck. Of course, they're included in the documentation as well. So talking about documentation, there is a really extensive manual coming with the product that's almost 100 pages, covering the normal procedures in a quick way and also in detail. Next up, we have our takeoff performance calculator. Now these things automatically populate when the aircraft is connected to the internet and when we do have data in the FMC, but we'll talk about this page in a bit more detail later on. Next up is the weight and balance. So currently, of course, the airplane is empty. We can either load it with a slider like this, or if we click on here, then we can manually type the amount of passengers and cargo that we want to have in here. Similar thing for the cargo and for the fuel. That is pretty much the setup that we are going to go with. For today's flight, let's take 20 tons of fuel on board, as we do plan to sit a couple of rounds in a holding while doing a little bit of air work and looking a bit at the systems, and then we're going to come back for an approach, followed by go around, and then a non-precision approach into a landing. So those demonstrator aircraft, they often have water tanks in the cabin where they simulate the weight of the passengers. So for our sake today, we will just about load the cargo completely full so that our airplane isn't totally empty, so that we can see it flying with a little bit of tamed performance, to call it that way, because the range between the zero fuel weight and the max takeoff weight is really great in this airplane. The max takeoff weight is about 157 tons, if I'm not mistaken. Might be 154. So we can see we got almost 60 tons of range of weight here, so the engines are really strong, and then when you're departing at a lightweight, they will push you up really quickly. So in order to tame the airplane, let's go full cargo, 20 tons of fuel, apply this. You can see our center of gravity move live over here. We see it down here, and we see the required units of trim as well. Finally, we do have some settings that we can configure, so we can choose between kilogram and pounds, or basically between, let's call it the commonly used units in aviation and the American units used in aviation. Also, we can choose IRS alignment, instant, short, and realistic. That's pretty similar to what we used from the PMDG aircraft. Link instruments, that's basically synchronizing up the left and the right side in the flight deck. Nose wheel steering on-off, that is basically if you are going to control nose wheel steering with your rudder pedals, or if you will use a separate axis. Brake temperatures, so that's pretty much the only failure that we still see in this aircraft. The brake temperatures can get pretty hot, and that can have consequences. Default thrust reduction acceleration altitude for the FMC. We can calibrate our thrust levers down here, so we are actually able to include stuff like the reverse on our thrust levers. So that is a pretty cool feature. You can calibrate that in here to your likings. Personally, I just went that idle on my hardware levers is idle in the simulator because I do like to have as much of a range in the thrust levers as possible. However, you can really configure that down to your own personal liking. Note that you do need to restart the flight in order for those changes to take effect. Last change up here, reverse on throttle axis, yes or no. So, combined with the calibration tab up there, you can basically decide if you want to configure a certain point in your throttle axis and then have reverse thrust below that. That might be a really useful feature, for example, when you're using the Thrustmaster Airbus thrust levers, because they do actually have that detent that would prevent you from accidentally going into reverse thrust. I would not recommend to use this when you do not have a reverse detent on your hardware thrust levers. So when I introduced this section about the EFB, I said that we will have an EFB, but that I'm going to talk about the things that it has and that it does not have. And what it does not have is any kind of SimBrief connectivity to show you either your flight plan or maybe some Navigraph charts. So that's the downside of the EFB here, that we're not able to view either of those directly within the simulator, but we actually have to make use of external programs for that. So you might just about pull them up on your tablet if you have one, or you might have to choose different ways of using those. Alright, that concludes a look at the EFB. And with all of that done, with the airplane loaded, let's go back to the weight and balance screen up there. And with that said, let's power up the airplane. The first thing that we are probably going to notice when we power it up is the sounds. And the sounds in this one is something that I really, really like. So I'm just going to shut up for now, and I will power this airplane up, and you can enjoy some of the sounds that I'm going to play. So note how those air conditioning fans are just slowly coming on there. That's a really cool immersion feature that they have over there, and something that I really like. Now, one thing to consider here, we do currently have a little bit of rain, so I'm just going to use that chance to actually turn on the wipers. And of course the rain stops exactly at this second. Well, that is bad luck. Anyway, what we can notice in here is that, as far as I could witness, we do actually not have a wiper effect. So, standard Asobo animation over here. Which doesn't surprise that because this aircraft is delivered directly with the simulator itself. So, it's of course making use of some default technology as it can. Before I'm gonna turn on the IRS, just a quick point here. While the airplane does not simulate any failures, it does have all those ECAM messages. So, I guess they just reused the code from X-Plane back there, and in X-Plane they actually had failures simulated in the A310. Now, over here, we can still see that stuff does have consequences, but not in all cases, but we're going to get to that later. Anyway, we can clear those out, as we can see. Alright, let's go ahead then and turn on the IRS and quickly configure it. So, A310 CF6 engines, database is current. Let's go to initRef, and we'll go from LFBO to LFBO. We don't need a company route, and as soon as that's entered and we cross-check the latitude and longitude up here, we press Align IRS, and that is going to align our IRS. Now, since I had it set to pretty much work immediately, we can see the thing has finished alignment. In realism mode, it's going to take anywhere between 8 and 16 minutes, as far as I'm aware, depending on where on the Earth latitude you are. Alright. Following Airbus SOP, this is the only thing that we do in the FMC by now, so let's start with a panel scan. No smoking, auto, seatbelts on, hydraulic reservoir quantities checked, low pressure lights illuminated, flight recorder ground control goes on. We arm the we set the strobes to auto, set the nav and logo lights to on, switch on all the switches up here, and do note that if the IRS is not yet aligned, you cannot switch the pitch trim on. And if this is off, then you will notice your flight control unit is off, and the thrust rating computer is off as well. So you can only do that once the IRS has finished alignment. In the flow, extinguish any white lights that we do see, which is pretty much Airbus standard. So some people say that the A310 and the A300-600 are the best Boeings that Airbus ever built. And while I do agree to a certain extent, it is also worth mentioning that in a lot of situations you can see the Airbus logic behind this. So yes, it is somewhat of a hybrid between Airbus and Boeing, but in the end it is very clear and very apparent that this actually is an Airbus. So if you're hoping to get a freeware Boeing here, then I will unfortunately have to disappoint you. You aren't. This is an Airbus, and this is very visible as well. Do note, as I'm just about switching to alternate braking, note how the accumulated pressure is going to decrease when I am about to apply the wheel brake. So check this. And of course it doesn't work on the review. What's that? Parking brake is released. We have the braking in alternate. I guess it's probably the way the chocks are simulated. Let me try that. Let me get the chocks out. Yeah. So it's the chocks. Of course that wouldn't happen in real life, but here you see now I'm applying the wheel brakes. Note how the accumulated pressure is reducing. That's a pretty cool feature. Right, let's go back to primary, set the parking brake again, and put our chocks in place again as well. So I guess what they're doing internally is that the chocks are simply simulating the parking brake without animating the lever, which still reflects on the brake pressure indicator. Well, it's unfortunate that we do find this kind of stuff right on the review, but at least we do see it. So that was landing a warning test there. Going down to the pedestal. Let's set the TCAS to above. The range to 12 miles. And that's something to be careful about when you're setting that range knob up here, which changes the range of the TCAS incorporated in the VSI up here, between 6 and 12 miles. That click spot for the fuel lever is very, very, very close. Alright, so that concludes our basic panel scan. Let's start with a bit of a setup here. And for this flight I did not generate a SimBrief flight plan, but we have simply set up the Navigraph charts. So if we're having a look at that, that is pretty much our plan for the day. So let's start programming that stuff. So we are the Airbus 310 as call sign. We're going to climb up to flight level, let's say a 130 or something. We don't want to go too particularly high. Cost NX, we don't need a lot. Well, 50 kinda is a lot, but you get where this is going. And our alternate airport today is going to be Bordeaux, Lima Fox Bravo Delta. Don't have any cruise wind data or anything like that, so we just about take it from here. Runway, well, 32 left we're going to take. Now we can have a look at the weather as well. So if we now take it from here, it's automatically included departure and destination. Toulouse in both cases here. And the wind is now 270 at 17, so it's calmed down a little bit, but still 17 knots. So runway 32 left certainly sounds logical. Agent 5 Papa departure, and we can insert this. And for the arrival we'll have the Agent 6 Tango. We'll initially do the ILS approach for runway 32 left, so let's program that. And Agent 6 Tango in here. For the transition, that one leads us to Agino, so we can take Agene 1 as an arrival transition. Insert that. Remove the discontinuity, and let's quickly check over this. That does look quite good. So I am pretty much happy with this. Secondary flight plan, we'll copy the active, and for the in a B page, 20 tons of fuel on board, so we can just about take that over from here. Zero fuel weight we have on the weight and balance tab up here, so it's 96.6 tons right now. Gross weight is calculated automatically, and the CG we need to put in, that one comes right from here, so 24.4. Right, finally, let's have a look at the takeoff data, and the takeoff data is going to come right from the EFB. So, if we once again have a look over here, runway length, we click on here, and then on the left north side, it just automatically takes the length of the departure runway that you have in your FMC, so we're just going to click on that. It's definitely a wet surface. Runway heading, same thing, we can take from here. The wind data is automatically inserted. However, at this present moment, it only works for the first flight of the day. So if you're doing a turnaround, this is not automatically updated. Not even when you're clicking on the refresh button, because that is only for the runway conditions, which does not seem, well, yeah, it's dry outside. In real life, it would still be wet at this moment after it rained for so long, but let's give it that. We'll switch it to wet anyway. Takeoff weight, we'll take it right from here. It's the gross weight, so taxi fuel is not taken into account here, but that still comes close enough. So 116.6, let's put that in. 116.6. Flaps, we'll just take a 15 and 0. Anti-ice is gonna be, well, 9 degrees, we'll switch it on. Engine anti-ice only, air conditioning on, calculate. It automatically comes up with the flex temperature and the takeoff speeds up here. So 135, 135, 154. Let's start putting that in. 135, 135. And then the V2 is taken directly from the FCU. So this pretty much forces you to preset it up here. So let's put 154 in. And here we go, 154. Once this is in, that's a little bit of a specialty here in the A310. We can push it in, and then that preset illuminates. Now you can pre-select your initial climb speed that you want to fly, without the need to change the V2. So as you can see, V2 up here remained in. And now we can set this to the flaps up maneuvering speed, which is going to be 216 knots. That becomes really helpful in case you do have an engine out later on, because profile mode, the equivalent to VNAV in the A310, is pretty basic in this, but we'll get to that later. Okay, so that pretty much concludes the FMC setup. On the progress page we could still tune our VORs as needed, but we will not need any on this flight today. And that's pretty much our setup complete. So you will see the lines on the ND do look a little bit weird over here. That's because we have our SID, then we have our star, and then I have a missed approach somewhere in between. So don't be surprised if that looks a little weird at first, but it actually is quite okay. Looking at the departure chart then, you go Argent 5 Papa, going from here, straight ahead to Toulouse VOR, left turn to Argent. Initial climb clearance flight level 70, so let's put that one up here. And that's pretty much it. For those of you who didn't know, you can switch between setting the altitude in 1000 and setting the altitude in hundreds by pushing the knob in, so clicking on the top part of the knob, and then you can change it in hundreds as well. That's a little bit of A310 logic, but you can kind of see how Airbus started developing that push and pull logics, even though they're still a bit different from the later Airbus models. Let's go ahead, start the APU, master on, and press the starter. So that's quite similar to the newer Airbuses as well, but it does take a very, very, very long time. Now, I could zoom into this, but after 2 minutes of watching the APU doing almost nothing, most of you would probably quit this video, so let's go ahead and do something useful in the meantime, which is reading our checklist. Before start checklist down to the line, cockpit prep completed, signs on, auto. Fuel quantity, we have 20 tons on board. Navigation checked set, landing elevation, that's up here, 500 feet set. Altimeters, they are at 1010 reading 500 feet, and we can set the marker down there as well. Okay, set. and brake any skid is normal on, before start checklist complete down to the line. You can see the APU still not even starting, so the flap opened and stuff like that, but it does take time. So make sure that you actually do start the APU early enough. Right, last thing for us to do, we can set that heading buck, and then we are pretty much waiting exclusively for the APU before we do start with the startup sequence. Let's maybe take a quick look outside and see if we can hear that APU, which is starting up right now. You can see when we're getting close, we actually do start hearing it. Right, that sounds quite stable, and indeed it is at 100%. APU generator is showing us some voltage over there as well, so let's go ahead, disconnect the ground power, and then we'll go into the EFB onto the connections and prepare pushback and departure. Alright, so the doors are closing. Main cargo doors do take a bit longer due to their size. And that's it, all the doors are closed. Now we are pretty much ready for a push and start. The only thing that I forgot once again is setting your flex temperature. And that actually has to be done on the thrust rating computer. So we can see if we have a look into the EFB up here on the departures, 57 degrees of flex temperature is planned. So we press the flex takeoff button, and then we enter 57 degrees. Like this. Alright. Nav mode can be armed. Profile mode can be armed. And that's pretty much it. Okay. So we are ready for pushback and startup. So transponder can go on. Parking brake is set. Doors are closed and the beacon light is on. Let's read the before start checklist below the line. Sometimes I did notice that the checklist in here just defaults to the bottommost position, and when it does that, there is unfortunately hardly any way to read it anymore. You can still pull it up and hold it somewhat, but that's something Inibuilds still needs to work on as of the time of this review. So, windows and doors closed, beacon on, and park and brake set. Before start checklist complete down to the line. Let's get a pushback truck and let's get going. Now that does take a little bit of a time because they still try to connect the truck by the moment you are requesting pushback in here. But let's go outside and let's listen to that. Sorry, let's look at that, of course. Here we go. Truck is coming in. Truck is crashing the nose wheel. And now it is connected. Time to release that parking brake. And off we go. We do have to steer it left-right manually using the little arrow keys that we have in here, but that actually works more precisely than I initially thought. The next very nice thing about the sounds, let's turn on the APU bleed and let's listen to what's about to happen. And here we go. You could see really well how the valves initially opened, the pack valves are open, the pressure build up, and as the pressure build up, we heard that sound increase. So that's a really nice sound effect there once more. Overall, this thing is very, very good at sounds. I can't overemphasize this. Okay, let's start engine number 2. So, ignition to A, press the starter, and contrary to the Airbuses that you might be used to, we don't quite have to switch the fuel on yet, but only at 20% N2. Let's start turning the plane. I probably messed the push up here a bit. Okay, we'll stop the push. Set the brakes. We do have 20%. Fuel on. Okay, we have a good start on the number 2 engine. Let's go ahead and start engine number 1. This one we'll look at from the inside. So we have N2 increasing, oil pressure increasing, N1 increasing. %, let's turn on the fuel. And while the engine is now starting up, it takes approximately 50 seconds per engine. It's just about noting that if you're looking really closely at those gauges, you can see how they are, first of all, of course, 3D, but you can also see a little strings of dirt everywhere. And that's one detail that I really like. So just look at those buttons. You can see the detail of that they are pushed sometimes, but there is a little bit of dirt accumulating everywhere, which is really nice effect. Overall, the plane doesn't look very dirty, but it actually looks like a well-used aircraft, so I really like the looks that they came up with over here. And we do have a good start on both engines, so ignition off, APU bleed off, APU off, anti-ice. Well, the next shower is about to come in. We have 10 degrees, so let's go ahead and turn the anti-ice on. Spoilers armed. Plan of flap 15, slaps 15 only departure. So first notch for the trim. We do get that from the weight and balance page, so it's 1.4 units up, as we can see down here. And that is set. Okay, flight control track. Full up, full down, neutral, full left, full right, neutral, and the rudder. Full left, full right, and neutral. Okay, that should be our procedure complete. So let's go ahead and read the after start checklist. I'm going to read that one off my electronic flight bag, rather off my iPad, rather than the EFB in the cockpit, because of that little glitch where it always wants to show you the bottom only. So after start checks, pitch trim 1.4 up, rudder trim 0, spoilers, armed, slat flaps 15 and 0. ECAM status checked, anti-ice on, hand signal received, after start checklist complete. So let's go ahead and taxi to runway 32 left. Nose light on, turn off lights on, and park and brake off. What you do notice is at light gross weights as we have right now, the airplane does start to roll by itself. So brake check, pressure 0. And we'll let it start rolling and then do our left-hand turn. I will use a little bit of thrust here. Generally, less than 40% works pretty well on the ground, and even at maximum takeoff weight, 40% N1 does give you very nice controllability. The overall taxi model, I do have to say that I pretty much like it. You do have a very good range of nose wheel steering available. The airplane is well controllable if you provide reasonable amounts of thrust. Like right now, you see 30%, we're at 116 tons, the maximum is 157, so we're well below our maximum takeoff weight, and we can see that the airplane rolls pretty nicely there. The brakes do seem quite strong, but then again, that might very well be realistic. I've heard that many Airbus pilots say that you have to be very careful on those Airbus brakes. As you can see right now, I'm just tapping them for a little bit, and the airplane is actually braking nicely. This is a wide-body aircraft. The nose gear is located quite a bit behind the pilot's seat, and you do notice that when you're going into a turn. So look how I'm steering the flight deck quite a bit over the line, and only then I start turning in order to keep the in order to keep the main wheels perfectly on that center line. Generally, you are on the center line when the line is going approximately through the rudder input stoplight up here. Clear left, clear right. So taxiing this airplane, you have to overshoot a little bit with the flight deck because the nose wheel is behind you and because you want to keep those main wheels on the runway, on the center line. Right, let's quickly review the departure briefing and then we'll read the before takeoff checklist down to the line. So this is going to be a left seat takeoff on runway 32 left, slats 15, flap 0, takeoff speed 135, 135, 154. We're using 57 degrees of flex temperature. The SID takes us straight ahead to the Toulouse VOR, then left turn to Agen, climbing initially flight level 70. Emergencies, we go straight ahead and climb to an altitude of 3,000 feet. That is going to keep us safe above the terrain. So let's do the taxi flow. And then we can go ahead with the before takeoff checks to the line. Flight controls, checked. Briefing, confirmed. Slats, flaps, 15, 0. Performance, FMAs. We have 57 degrees flight temperature. Speeds, 135, 135, 154. And profile, climb, and nav are armed. Takeoff config, checked. Transponder, squawk is in, XPDR set. Before takeoff checklist completed, down to the line. Right, we'll take the next taxiway off to our left-hand side, and then we are pretty much at runway 32 left. 3,500 meters of runway available, so plenty of runway to play with. But nonetheless, we are going to follow this one accurately, and then we'll see where we are going to get. For the takeoff, Inibuilds simulated the so-called go levers on the A310, which is pretty much the same as the toga knob that we're used to from the Boeing aircraft, by putting it on the ATC COM button that is located up here on the glare shield. So this is actually our toga button in the A310. Not in the real one, but in the real one you have those small go levers in the middle of the thrust levers below there, which are pretty much not reachable at all from a normal position. That's why Inibuilds have put it up here. Okay, we are clear on the approach. Let's put those lights on. TCAS to Tara. Before takeoff checklist below the line. Cabin secure, TCAS, Tara, packs on, ignition on, anti-ice on, before takeoff checklist complete. Now looking outside, we might as well have turned the anti-ice off, but let's not deal with that anymore. We do have sufficient reserve performance available. Once again for the lineup, overshoot that center line, then turn around. You can see what good of an angle it has. Alright, timing, Let's bring those thrust levers up. Stabilized. Set takeoff thrust. And off we go. Takeoff thrust set, indications normal. 100 knots. V1 rotate. Gear up. Positive freight. So let's follow that flight director command bar. That's the sound of the sim. Sorry, the sound of the trim. I'll put the autopilot on, and then we can see how the autopilot is going to fly this. So, accelerating. Target speed has increased, 250 knots. Nose is slowly coming down. Passing the S speed, sled 0. And something I did notice is that the profile mode, or the autopilot in general, seems to be very, very careful with accelerating the plane. So look at how slowly it actually is accelerating up here. So I would expect it to do quite a bit more than this. But nonetheless, that is my personal expectations. I don't have any data to back that one up. But look at how it's almost maintaining its airspeed there. Now it's accelerating again. Might of course be related to the weather as well. Okay, flaps up, no lights. Landing gear neutral. Spoilers disarmed, and we can switch the lights off up here as well. And the temperature is currently 12 degrees, so we can put the engine anti-ice off. After takeoff and climb checklist. Sled flaps retracted, landing gear up neutral, packs, run, and altimeters. Set standard. Passing 5.6, climbing. Well, let's climb all the way up to 130. And that's the after takeoff climb checklist complete. So we can see it just about reached its climb speed, passing about 6,000 feet. So it took 5,500 feet to accelerate with an acceleration altitude set at 1,000 feet AGL. So that is a very, very, very slow acceleration. Again, I don't know if that is realistic to the real plane. I would expect it not to be, but Inibuilds will probably know better than I do in this particular case. Overall, as I said earlier, we are at comparably light weights with these loadings, so we are doing like 4,000 feet a minute and a bit more up here. So, TAT in icing range, and indeed we are going through small cloud here. Let's put the anti-ice on for a short while. Passing 100, speed target increases, and here we can see that acceleration thing once again. Look at how it's doing it. So now that it has achieved a good rate of acceleration, the vertical speed is actually increasing once again already. So see how that trend vector is just about at 5-6 knots maybe. I would expect it to accelerate quite a bit faster than this, instead of climbing at 2,000 feet a minute. Almost approaching 1 to go, so let's go into vertical speed mode up here and select 1,000 manually. And here again, the plane does need quite a time to react. Like, look at this. Remember when I engaged VS? And it's still trying to follow it. Still not doing it. And now we are slowly getting into the region. But look at how we climbed 500 feet just for that reduction in vertical speed by 1,000 feet a minute. So that is a very slow response of the autopilot. Right, next up, let's first of all, let's be fair to the airplane. We don't want it to do a turn like this. So let's go heading select and just fly it across that VOR. Let's see how the autopilot is responding when we do a couple of turns as well. Right now it's leveling off. You can see once again very slowly approaching the target altitude. So it does take its time, but on the positive side, it does achieve what it is supposed to achieve, so that's quite a good thing as well. Okay, so up you are, Throttle 130. So let's test a couple of those autopilot modes, and let's see how it responds. We'll start by doing a simple left turn to a heading of 270 degrees. So if you push the heading knob in like this, it just synchronizes to the current heading. If you pull it out, it brings you into heading select, which is kind of what you know from the A320s and A330s as well. But you can also select the different modes down here. So to go into nav mode, you always have to press that button. But for now, let's start our left-hand turn towards 270 degrees. Very smooth banking there. That's really nice to see. Perfectly maintaining its 25 degrees angular bank-ish. Starts rolling wings level. Really smooth there. That is really good. And slowly but steadily it's approaching the target heading, so that is quite a good turn there. Let's try the same thing now with 15 degrees angular bank selected. So right now it used to be in normal. I'm changing it to 15 degrees angular bank. Let's do another turn, let's say a heading 240 now. Here we go. Again, perfectly maintains the bank angle, follows the command very nicely, so good job there. The next thing for us to check then is going to be acceleration and deceleration. So we are in altitude hold with manual thrust up here. So let's go ahead and reduce that speed all the way to the minimum clean speed. That's going to be somewhere around 215 we said. And at the same time, we'll go further left to some waypoint. Also, we're out of the icing conditions, so any ice can go off. Turn off lights off. Seatbelts, well, they will remain on, because we still want to do a little bit of stuff. Let's also take a direct. Let's say we want to go to Agino. So now, direct to Agino. Insert. And do note that it does not automatically go into nav mode like the newer Airbuses would. So we still have to press nav manually. Now it's pretty much going back to the line. Something I did notice with those lines is that at the end of the turn you might just have a little incorrect drawing there, like you see that little glitch at the end of the turn before it starts the straight line. So that's something where any builds can still improve on. And do notice how it's losing a little bit of altitude there. So the autopilot is actually not following the flight director correctly here. Because right now we are reducing speed, we are turning and trying to maintain altitude. And that seems to be a bit too much for this autopilot to accomplish. That's the altitude alerter playing there. And that is something that you have to take into account when you're flying this airplane on a non-precision approach. We will see that later on, but if you're at low speeds and if you're making turns, especially when you're making turns while you're decelerating, then you can see exactly what you're seeing right now. The speed is going below the target speed by about 10 knots, but when you're operating with the flaps extended, that can be that can put you right into the amber band and eventually lead to an autopilot disconnect. I have been able to reproduce that scenario 2 times already, so that is something that Ini definitely needs to put a little bit more work into. Now once again, losing a bit of altitude there while it's maintaining its speed, so that's not exactly perfect. Alright. But at least we are moving where we are supposed to move. So that's something for a start, isn't it? Next up, let's have a little look into some of the capabilities of the FMC. So we'll just about keep the speed where it is. And in general, we do have a VNAV profile available in here, which is not as sophisticated as modern days aircraft's VNAV. So we do get our top of descent that is drawn up here. We do get our speed limit point, but I did find that when you put it into more complicated situations, so let's just about go direct the second Ageno point down there. But I did find that when you put it into more complex situations, the VNAV can just quit out and then you have to do things manually. And on the topic of VNAV and VNAV capabilities, Inibuilds said on their forums that this would be to the real airplane, and that VNAV would just be that bad on the real airplane. And that is something that I honestly have to doubt. There are certain certification requirements, and while the A310 is without any doubt one of the first Airbus aircraft featuring VNAV at all, you know, if that stuff is in there, then it will work. Or at least it will not glitch out as bad as it sometimes does on this particular aircraft. You've seen it on my descent tutorial where VNAV just glitched out and we had to do things manually. So when you are flying this A310, be prepared to actually do that kind of stuff manually. Inibuilds says it's realistic. I highly doubt it because certification requirements would just not allow it, not even at the time where this aircraft was built. But I guess we will just not reach an actual conclusion there. So the next thing that we will do is try out a holding. So over at Ageno, we go in Ageno, we go and hold, and we'll just about take the predetermined limits over there. So insert that. And that's our holding symbol up there on the navigation display. And once we are actually overflying Ageno, it will then depict our actual hold and we will enter it. So let's see how that is going to work then. So they say hold speed 230 knots, so let's go 230 knots. Note those sounds, by the way. I like the engine sounds. I really like them. We are sitting quite a bit ahead of the engine, so if we are looking outside the window up here, then there's our wings. Somewhere over there is our engines, so we are sitting quite a bit in front of those. So I would say that this general engine howl that we hear is quite an accurate thing, if you ask me. We can also have a look at our planned route already, so let's use the plan mode for a second here to see what we actually put in. So this is the routing that we have programmed, leading us onto the ILS approach for runway 32 left. And let's quickly go ahead and do our approach setup as we're approaching the actual holding. So here's our chart from the Navigraph charts once again. Frequency 109.3, you do need to set that manually, the Airbus does not auto-tune it for you. Contrary to the newer Airbuses that you might be used to. So we have 322 on the course, 109.3 on the heading, and 700 on the minima basically. On the takeoff approach page we will put that MDA in, 697, up here. We'll keep it at a flap 30 landing. Wind correction, yeah, we'll definitely need some, so let's take 7 knots on top. Alright. In order to actually see the ILS data on the primary flight display, we have that little switch up here, which we need to move down to ILS. But since we're just about to enter the holding yet, I'll just keep it in nav. Normally you would switch this down to ILS by the time that you pass 10,000 feet in the actual descent. So we're overflying Agena, or Ageno, and entering that holding that we have self-defined. So let's have a look into how this Airbus is actually going to fly that holding. Now, I don't want you to sit here for 4 minutes just watching it fly that holding, so let me take it away for you. The holding entry itself is normally going quite well, but you do see how it varies the angle of bank between 15 and 25 degrees roundabout. That is because it's really trying to follow that line accurate, which in turn leads to those variations in bank angle. Let's put that range down a bit. So you can see it just started going outside of that predetermined arc, and that's why it went to maximum bank angle now in order to recapture it. And something that you should notice here as well is that downwind lag, which is not really drawn perfectly. And once we pass the end of that downwind, it's going to be interesting to see how the airplane is going to intercept that arc over here. So now it's shifting a bit, but now you can see it on the inbound sector. So you can see the holdings are not drawn quite perfectly. And right now it's giving us a bit of a left bank because it wants to resume that track that it has drawn up there. So you can see how the airplane tries to follow the holding to as good as it can, but it's not quite perfect in once drawing it and second following what it has actually drawn. Now, is that a problem? Well, to be honest, not really, because at least for flight simulation, it gets the job done, so that is quite a bit better than some of the other stuff that we have seen in some other add-ons. So here we go, now it's on the outbound lag. Now we can see that the line drawing is better as well. So I would say the holdings aren't perfect, but they do get the job done, and that's probably the most important point up here. As we are flying along, there is something to note up here as well, and that is that we actually do get weather radar returns. Now, you've probably seen my video on why Asobo's weather radar is just not very good, and therefore I will only cover this briefly. But you can see that we do get weather returns up here, with the antenna tilt set to 6 degrees up. Now, if we're looking outside, there is literally nothing 6 degrees higher than us. So, the weather radar is just the 2D top-down view that you get from the Microsoft SDK, but without any actual weather radar abilities. So this is more like what you see on the Rain Radar app from the App Store or something on your iPhone than an actual aircraft weather radar. Now, is that nice to have? Well, there has been quite an exchange on that below my video on the topic. So the overall answer to that is some people prefer to have that over having nothing. Others say, well, it's useless the way it is, so why do we have it at all? Now, in my opinion, nice visual gimmick, but please do focus on getting some additional functionality in that in the future. Alright, so we have pretty much finished our setup for the ILS approach, so as we're about to start the inbound turn, let's start descending a bit. I'm going to use level change mode for this. We'll keep the speed at 230 knots, because we still want to see how it's going to fly that inbound turn on the holding. So, down we go. VNAV overall, level change overall, is doing quite a good job here at entering that descent, so that was a really smooth one. Passengers would certainly have appreciated this. So, here we go on the inbound turn on the holding. A small word as we are watching this one flights thing on the overall system depth of the A310. In terms of normal procedures, we can do pretty much everything that we would expect to do on an actual line flight in the 310. If we go into abnormals, then things are partially there, like, let's go to manual pressurization here. We'll switch system number 1 off. We do get the associated ecam procedure, and we can't even follow it, so it says manual pressurization on. Let's go to manual pressurization. And it does recognize that down here. So procedure, cabin pressure manual control. Okay. So in these terms, the systems are pretty much doing what they're supposed to do. But let's, since we are in manual pressurization already, let's go ahead and see what happens if we open up the outflow valve completely. So that's a very slow response there on the cabin vertical speed gauge, but it is coming up. So that's something new. In the older versions, in the version 1.0, the initial release version, this wouldn't respond at all. So it seems like they are putting a little bit of work into this stuff. Let's put it all the way back in auto. I'm going to turn the automatic pressurization system back on. Outflow valves are closing. Well, that cabin rate of descent there is not accurate. We've seen that previously at this rate of the outflow valves. It was somewhere up there. Now it just went down straight away, so there's probably some separate animations going on everywhere. But overall, you know, it's not perfect, but it kinda starts getting the job done. So let's go ahead and resume our approach. I will go direct to Gino once again, and then I am going to delete the holding. Like this. So we're about to start our approach. You can see our VNAV profile down here. So we are just about paralleling it, tiny bit on top. Supposed to maintain 8,000 feet until Gino. So turn that thing into profile mode. And what we will notice is that on the descent, profile does take all the restrictions into account. Like you can see, it's now leveling off at 8,000, which is correct here. But that VNAV deviation there is just continuing to descend, which is certainly not correct. So that's what I meant earlier, saying that the VNAV in here is not perfect. So let's see what it's about to do now. Set the altitude down to 4,000. We'll go back to local QNH. 1010. And we can see now it's pretty much trying to dive for that VNAV profile, which initially was below the 8,000 feet restriction. So that is stuff that the real airplane would absolutely not do. There is no chance it would get certification if it did that. Absolutely no chance. Also, we can see it tries to reduce its speed now. So the buck just shifted from 250 knots down to 220 knots, which is the restriction at Delta 152 Romeo. But now we get the more drag message, so let's help it a bit with that. Let's get the speed brake out, half. But overall, we can see the VNAV profile itself is not very convincing there. So it does get a basic job done. It is sufficient to get most flight simulators from A to B, but if you're looking for 100% study level, then this certainly needs a bit more improvement. We're going to take it out of profile mode now. We'll go back to level change. To flight down manually. We've passed 10,000 feet, so let's turn a couple of lights on. The passengers are still seated. We'll put the ILS mode active up here, and more drag, that is copied. I disagree though. Alright, that's pretty much our approach preparation done, so we can go to the approach page over here. And we're looking at a final approach at 151 knots. So, time to read the approach checklist. Signs, set, briefing, confirmed, ecam status, checked. Altimeters, 1010 reading 5200, minimums 700 set. Ignition, well, yeah, it's 8 degrees, we can turn it on. And the anti-ice as well then. And landing elevation 500 feet set. Approach checklist completed. Glide slope is coming alive. Let's start slowing ourselves down a bit. So slats 15. So remember, we are going to fly this one into go around. And what's the airplane doing there? Certainly not what it's supposed to do. That's what it sounds like. The autopilot is not 100% reliable. I don't know where it tries to fly us right now, but then we just tell her where to fly us, and that's going to be the Fox point, the final approach fix. Here we go. Something else I did notice is that when you're trying to intercept the final approach using, oops, sorry, that'll change. Let's go down to 3000. So when you're trying to intercept the final approach with nav mode, then it might just parallel the localizer instead of capturing it. So what I'm about to do when I'm on final approach, I put it into heading select, and then I arm the land mode. Both autopilots on. And we can go vertical speed, trying to make it a continuous descent approach. But once again, it's reacting so slowly, it's an odd style anyway. Standard Airbus approach profile does apply over here. So we're intercepting that glide slope using the slats in the first mode, which is 15, and 2,000 feet above the field elevation, so at 2,500 on the altimeter, we'll take flap 15. Once those are down, and latest by 5 miles, landing gear down. When the gear is down, flaps 20, flaps 40, and then we are configured. That should give us a nice intercept at an altitude of that should nicely get us stable at 1,000 feet. Localizer alive, block star, glide star. Missed approach 5,000, as we can see down here. In. Once again, you can see how the autopilot has some problems following the flight director here. That's climbing a bit, which is not very good. But we are slowly getting there. So that is certainly something that the airplane shouldn't do. The autopilot should be more accurate in these terms. Okay, about 2,000 feet above the field, so flaps 15. Get that speed down, and as the flaps are coming out over here, gear down. Said 151 is going to be final approach speed, right? Yes, we did. Final approach is active. And we're below the limit speed for flaps 20, so let's go flaps 20. Landing lights and nose light can come on. Cabin is pretty much secured. Flaps 40. 152 knots final approach speed and landing checklist. Landing gear down, auto brakes off, any skid on, slats flaps. Still extending right now. .30 and 40, and the speed brake is armed. Sorry, spoiler's armed. Landing check is complete. Right, we're going to fly down into go-around, see how the automatic go-around is going to work in the A310. Basically, we press the toga button, retract the flaps 1 notch, so we'll go to the 20 setting and verify that we do have lateral navigation mode. Now the lateral mode does like to act up in the 310 over here, so I will use heading select initially. And at the acceleration altitude, which is 1,000 feet above the airfield, so 1,500 on the altimeter, we'll press level change, plug it up, and then we'll retract the flaps and schedule. And that's the entire go-around procedure that we are about to see done. Do note that the present beta version I'm using has a bug that does not play any radio altimeter callouts, so that's why you don't hear any. Approaching minimums. Minimum go around flaps. So, thrust, go around, flaps to 20. Positive rate, gear up. $1,500. Level change, buck up, and we'll set climb thrust as well. Okay, looks like we do have good navigation, so nav mode. So, flaps up. And approaching the S speed, we can then retract the flaps. The slats as well. And slat 0. Let's give it 220 knots. One to go, vertical speed. Once again, it does take quite a time for it to actually reduce the vertical speed. Alt star. Right, and we're capturing that altitude, landing gear off. Spoil is disarmed, we can switch off the landing lights and the taxi light. Note that the A310 AVCOM does say the landing lights can be turned off below 10,000 if the runway turn-off lights are switched on. So that's why I'm switching the landing lights off here. Okay, after takeoff climb checklist, flaps retracted, landing gear up neutral, packed on, altimeters 1010 set. After takeoff climb checklist complete. So, that was a very, very, very well flown go around. So this is the point where the autopilot really shines. So the go around was perfectly executed by it. I have nothing to add. Perfectly executed. So let's once again go in a heading select, make a left turn, and now we'll do a non-precision approach. Well, somewhere around heading 150, that should still keep us at a slight distance from the field. And into the FMC. So, lateral revision here, new destination, LFBO. We need to do that in order to get our airport back down here so that we can reselect a new approach. And on this one we will do the on-off approach for runway 32 left. We'll once again take it from a Geno. And we'll select no star, and only when that is selected you can actually press the insert button. So direct to the Geno, insert, and let's go back into nav mode. So let's have a look into what we actually entered, and let's get out the associated chart as well. So, Toulouse approach 32 left, and we will take the RMP approach, which we have over here. So, what does that say? First thing, we gotta deselect the ILS modes, because we don't want to use those. We'll select an inappropriate frequency as well, so that we don't even get any returns that we aren't supposed to have. Minimum 750, and we'll put 747 in here as well. MSA 3000, and looking at the initial approach chart, coming from a Geno towards Bravo Oscar 602 at 5000, then we'll make a left turn, India Oscar 32 left, max 210, 3000 feet, and then we have the Fox Oscar, which we'll find on the RMP chart, That is our final approach fix there in 3,000 feet. We do a 3-degree glide down here, which we have on the page up here as well, so it's very important that you put that in correctly. Small briefing there in terms of what we have to do with the A310 procedures, and that is that in the A310 we do need to configure the airplane all the way for landing prior to the final approach fix. So we are not supposed to be decelerating anymore on the final approach. The manual says to start the configuration latest 5 miles prior to the final approach fix. So I would say we just about do it from there. We'll fly it towards the final. Then we can see the distance between the Fox Oscar and the India Oscar, 7.7, 13.3, so sorry, to 11.3. So we'll just about start configuring, let's say 2 miles prior to the India Oscar 3-2 left. So that is our plan on what we are about to do for this arrival. And since we're so close to the airport, let's go ahead and read the approach checklist straight away again. So, approach checks. Science, set, briefing, confirmed, ECAM status, checked, minimums, 750 set, ignition on, landing elevation, 500 feet set. Approach checklist complete. We're at 5,000 feet altitude right now. We'll maintain those until Bravo Oscar 602, and then we will start our further descent. Quick look into the FMC as well. Fox Oscar 3-2 left, 3-degree glide path is in there, and the altitude restrictions are correct as well. By the way, do note that wing flex up here. You can really see how that wing bends upwards. This is a good view. You can really see it over here. That's a very well done job. You can see it somewhat twitching over there as well. So, really good job there, Inibuilds. The outside model and the way that it behaves, I really like it. In my opinion, they did a very good job on the outside model. One thing that once again does stand out here is those huge halo animations, but I believe that is actually a Microsoft thing and not an Inibuilds thing. One thing, however, to point out here as well is that when you are standing on the ground at night and you have the navigation lights turned on, you can see a huge white shine beyond the navigation lights at the end of the wings. That is certainly not supposed to be there, but you know, I guess we just can't have it all. Okay, approaching 602. After we can start our descent. So let's go down now. 3,000 feet. And we said 1.5 miles or 2 miles prior to the India Oscar we want to start our deceleration. That actually works fairly well with the 210 restriction over there, since we're just about flying a little bit faster than 210. This one, we do actually intend to fly it down to a landing, so auto brakes low is armed. Okay, 2 miles to go, so slats 15. slats 15 we have. Flaps 15. Why is it climbing? Certainly not supposed to do that. And look at how the speed is undershooting. Well, not perfect. Not perfect. But that's what I told you earlier, that in the low speed regime, this plane does sometimes like to act up a little bit. Alright, flaps 20. Let's select auto on the TRP that was still in from the previous go around. And look at that. Look at the speed decreasing. Flaps full. And can it catch up, or is it gonna... It can catch up. Barely. Barely. Right, so final 3 is armed. That gives us our vertical deviation for the final approach. And now we can put it in a profile. Profile descent is armed. And look how it overshoots over here. That's not very good. So, VDEF is coming in, profile descent is on. Let's set the missed approach altitudes. 5,000 feet once again. And we have over the Fox Oscar now, and we do start our descent. So, let's do a couple distance to altitude checks. So, 7 miles out, 2,770. So we're now 7 miles out and we're about 50 feet high. So 6 miles, 2,455. Six miles, 70 high. Too bad it was in a good way, and then I don't know if it was an updraft that caught it or whatever, but it kinda lost it. Okay, 5 miles, 2,135. In the meantime, we can read the landing checklist. So, landing gear, down, auto brakes, low, any skid on, slats flaps, 30-40, and spoilers, armed, landing checks complete. Okay, 5 miles, and we are pretty much on glide. 4 miles, 1,820. Can switch those lights on. Look how it's losing a bit of speed there. It certainly has its problems catching up with the turbulence. So, 4 miles and we are 100 high. 3 miles, 1,500. We can see the puppies, so we don't need to do any further distance altitude checking there. Okay, 3 miles, 1,550. Let's go manual. I will keep the auto throttle in here, because that is the way that Airbus normally wants their aircraft to be flown. So let's do that and see how it's gonna react. Last word here, by the way, we flew most of it in Autopilot, but let me quickly comment on the manual flight model as well, because I do have to say I kind of like the way this airplane flies manually. So you certainly feel its energy, you feel its inertia, but the airplane itself is still very well controllable, so I quite like it. One last thing about the upcoming landing. Due to the beta version that we are using, we do not have any GPWS callouts from the altimeter right now, so do keep that in mind, and if my touchdown is going to be a bit positive, then that is likely going to be the reason for it. Have to fight those gusts a bit here. Okay, 3 reds, correcting. Have to fight those gusts a bit here, but that feels pretty realistic the way we have to do this. So that's something I certainly like. Okay, 50, 30. And we're down. Speed brake up, thrust versus normal. 100 knots. Manual brakes, we're gonna catch this exit, 60 knots. Right, 40 minutes flight time. And here we are. So, that landing was, well, flat a tiny bit too high, but it's really hard to judge that height without a radial altimeter, so don't blame me for it. Let's go right back to the Airbus delivery ramp and put the airplane back to where we parked it, and then we'll tell our possible future owner if we would actually recommend getting this airplane or not. Now that is a recommendation that most of you guys will probably already know about, mostly because this airplane already comes for free with Microsoft Flight Simulator, but nonetheless I only find it fair to put it into context because Inibuilds has done quite a tremendous job on working on this one, so in my opinion they deserve a fair opinion on their work as well. Do note again the taxi model. I'm in idle thrust right now. It maintains around about 10 knots of speed, which at low weights I could certainly judge as realistic, even though I have never flown an A310 before. So the overall taxi model does feel pretty nice. In my opinion, very good job done there. Okay, after landing checklist. Slats flaps retracted, transponder, XPDR, weather radar off, spoilers disarmed, and APU started. After landing checklist complete. So let's add a little bit of thrust and get the thing to roll a tiny bit faster. You can see I'm just about going at 30-ish% here, and the thing is doing quite a good job at accelerating, so the taxi model does seem to be well balanced there. Okay, that's our delivery center up here. Slow it back down. Again, you only need a very tiny amount of brake pressure in order to actually get the airplane to slow down. And once again, overshooting with the flight deck, and then we can go in with our tiller and get the airplane to turn onto the line. Tiny bit of thrust there as we do lose some energy in the turn. That's about it. Flights go off, APU avail, very good, and APU bleed can already come on. So take it ahead a tiny bit, and that should be good. Park and brake set, APU running, let's shut those engines down. No GSX, we don't need you, thanks. Okay, both engines below 20%, beacon off, and let's run the parking checklist. APU bleed on, engines off, differential pressure 0, light signs set, fuel pumps off but 1 for the APU, window and probe heat off, parking brake and shock set, parking checklist complete. Okay, let's get ourselves a chocks and a ground power, then we'll secure the airplane, and then I'm going to provide you my final feedback on the Inibuilds A310. And I know you shouldn't do this as the APU is still running down, but nonetheless, let's go batteries off. Okay, securing aircraft checklist. Nav systems off, oxygen off, APU bleed off, emergency exit lights disarmed, APU and battery off. Securing aircraft checklist complete. Alright, so here we are, sitting back on the Airbus delivery center ramp in Toulouse. Now, what's my final opinion on, well, first of all, my parking skills? Not 100% there yet, but we're getting there. But what's my final opinion on the Airbus A310? So, let's start with some basics. Microsoft brought us this one for free, and it's included as a default aircraft now in the 40th anniversary edition of Microsoft Flight Simulator. I love it. So for anybody who wants to start with high-fidelity add-ons, this is the aircraft to go to. You can operate it under normal procedures, pretty much entirely by the book. The vast majority of systems do work quite fine, with the couple of exceptions that we have seen in the Autopilot, that it did not really like to maintain its speed and maintain its vertical modes 100% precisely, especially in the low-speed regime, so that is something to be aware of. Hopefully Inibuilds is going to fix that in the closer future, though. VNAV is still a bit of a thing there, but well, apparently it is true that real A310 pilots don't rely on it too much and actually use selected modes like level change or vertical speed quite a bit. So VNAV certainly isn't as good in the A310 as it is in, for example, a Boeing 737 or other modern aircraft types. Did I just say 737 is modern? Anyway. So, whether or not VNAV is as bad in the real plane as it is in the Inibuilds is something that remains up for debate. I certainly don't think it is, because what we're seeing in here is quite a bit below the certification requirements. But nonetheless, that is the point that is still up for debate. But except for that, the airplane is overall performing really nice. The external model as well as the internal model are looking very good. The sounds are pretty good and pretty convincing in my opinion as well. The flight model does feel realistic. And the Autopilot, if in all points it would shine as much as it did in the automatic go-around, then I would say this is a very, very good Autopilot. Now, unfortunately, it's not 100% there yet, but it does get the job done. The pilot does, however, need to stay on top of the aircraft, so you can't just totally set and forget it. But I guess that is a different story. Now, since this is a long-haul airliner, actually the first high-fidelity long-haul airliner that we do have available in Microsoft Flight Simulator, it might be worth pointing out as well that the initial release version, I flew it on, I believe, 7 long-haul flights so far, and it did perform pretty much accurate to the numbers. Now the beta version did use quite a bit less time and less fuel than what SimBrief predicted. I'm not 100% sure if that is just a SimBrief problem or if it is a problem with the beta version of the aircraft, but since, as said, that is a beta, I'm not going to comment on that much further, and I'll simply put it down as they had it right initially. I'm sure they'll have it right in the next public release as well. One thing that is worthy of pointing out is that on the initial release the airplane had quite some problems with frame rates, which occasionally dropped really low for many people. So with the beta update, at least on my personal computer, they fixed a lot of that. There are still occasional frame rate drops, but overall it does perform quite nice now. However, I do hear some mixed feedback on that, so frame rates is still a bit of a thing. But since the aircraft does come for free with the 40th anniversary edition, don't forget to download that free update that adds the cabin and some crisper texture from the marketplace. It is for free, and it's called A310 Enhanced. I do recommend everyone to go and try it out. This is a really enjoyable and fun aircraft. It is somewhat a hybrid between Airbus and Boeing, but you can see that it is an Airbus pretty much everywhere around in the flight deck. So that is going to conclude our review of the Airbus A310. I hope that you have enjoyed it as much as I did. Like, comment and subscribe. And if you really want to support the channel, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me a Coffee link that you can find in the video description below. Thank you very much for joining, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'm looking forward to see you all again on the next one.